This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on importance of dedicated freight corridors and other infrastructure developments. The participants are Shishir Sinha, economic analyst, and AIR correspondent Arjun J. Chaudhary.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, via video conferencing at 11 o'clock in the morning today, inaugurated the western part of the DFC, the dedicated freight corridor. And the news that's come out from this inauguration ceremony is the level of development in this section of the western DFC from Rewari in Haryana to Madar in Rajasthan, which is 306 kilometers long. So apart from the laying of rail tracks, there is also the speed at which the containers will move from point to point and the stations in between, which will benefit. Also, there's connectivity with the multimodal logistic hubs and the Western Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. So the transportation and logistics in the country, which is seeing a major upgrade right now. What are your views on this specific project and how soon are we going to see the demographic dividends?
When we talk about transportation, we all know that we have four types of transportation. One is the railway, then the roadways, then the airways, and of course, finally, seaways or the waterways. And when we talk about development of a country, role of all these four are very, very critical. We have seen a lot of development on the road. We have seen a lot of development on waterways. And now we are seeing a lot of development on the rail. Let me just give you one perspective. When we talk about railroad competition, it is the railway who is losing a lot of business to the road because road has a number of advantages. When we talk about road, it is a point-to-point connectivity. The cost is much lesser. The time taken is much lesser because of the improved road quality. And railway was lagging into that particular area. So now with the help of Eastern Freight Corridor and Western Freight Corridor, railway aims to pick up that market share. And when we talk about the specific section which was inaugurated today, there are two developments in that. One is, of course, the section, and the second one is the double stack container. These two are going to give a boost to the freight corridor. And please remember, when we talk about Western Corridor, it is starting from UP and it is ending in Mumbai. So it is covering a lot of states. It is giving a lot of business opportunity. And we are not just developing the railway track or the railway infrastructure. We are also developing the industrial development, industrial areas which are in the vicinity of the freight corridor. And of course, the time taken will be much lesser. Just imagine when we are transporting perishable goods and it takes 3 days or 4 days to reach. You can imagine the quantum of loss because of the time taken and because of the slow speed. Now we are in a situation when the goods can be transported in a dedicated corridor in much lesser time. This is one advantage. The second advantage is the passenger train. Many a times we have seen a situation when the single track is used for passenger transportation as well as for the freight transportation. So when you have a dedicated corridor for the freight transportation, there will be much more scope available for the passenger transportation. So the speed will be much higher, time will be much less for the freight, and there will be similar situation for the passenger. So it is not just the goods transportation which is going to get benefit. It is also the passenger transportation through the railway which will get the benefit.
So when the Eastern DFC was inaugurated by Prime Minister Modi earlier, the Bhopur-Khurja line in Uttar Pradesh, then also the Kanpur main line was being decongested. So right now talking about the Western DFC, which is 1,504 kilometers long, northwest from Dadri, UP to Mumbai in southwest, we are looking at the promise being implemented by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the manifesto when they came to power. But really the implementation not only goes to the Prime Minister's office but always to the Railways Ministry as well. So how do you see Piyush Goyal's role here?
Railway has a much bigger role to play. I mean, Prime Minister's office can provide a kind of layout that you have to work on that. It is ultimately the ministry how it executes that. Fortunately, we have good funding from Japan, which is really, really helping. And that funding is available at a very low cost and for a very long period of time. So there will not be much burden on our exchequer because we are getting the money. And there is no problem on the money part. The second is the land acquisition. That is the most critical part. And what we have observed, what we have seen in these two corridors, I can remember correctly, 98 to 99% land has already been acquired. So this is another development. Third is the engineering and the technological part of that. We are getting good support not just internally but also from the external side. So all these are helping to achieve the completion of projects according to the timeline. So I think the completion of projects, the first phase is likely to be completed by the end of this calendar year, December 2021. And we expect that more and more goods will start moving on this particular corridor. There's the western one and the eastern one. And the second part, which you mentioned in the beginning, that the speed at which the good is to be transported, that is very, very critical, because the freight movement has always a complaint that it takes a lot of time. Now that time will be reduced, and that is going to help the freight movement, and it will help the railway to regain the market share in the freight movement.
So the claim is that the freight trains will travel at 100 kilometers per hour as compared to 75 kilometers earlier. And also the load capacity is 4 times more because of a stronger axle in the container trains. So we're also looking at procurement practices here, the submission of bids electronically, and therefore are we seeing the project's completion within a defined time frame?
Certainly, and you rightly mentioned about the various characteristics. One is when we are talking about length of train. So at this moment, when we talk about the ordinary freight train, maximum length of a train is a 700 meters. But on a dedicated freight corridor, the length is 1500 meters. So it is almost double than what you have today. The second one is the load. How much load freight train can take on a dedicated freight corridor? It is around 13,000 tons. And if we take the existing one, it is just 5,000 tons. So it is almost 3 times of the existing capacity. So if you take these two features, certainly things will be in a bigger quantity, can be transported in lesser time. And since we are connecting the entire country through the eastern and through the western, of course, the southern part will be taken in due course of time. But at least large part of country will be covered with these two freight corridors with a common station at Dadri. Certainly, that is going to help the logistic and the freight movement in a much bigger way.
So when we discussed about the eastern DFC, we spoke about the beneficiaries along that line from Dhakuni in West Bengal all the way to Sanewal in Ludhiana, Punjab, which is near it. Then you go through Jharkhand, Bihar, UP, Haryana. So what are the demographic dividends as far as Western DFC is concerned? In UP, for instance, we saw the aluminium industry, dairy farming, textile, glassware, locks, asafida, pottery products, really getting the benefit of freight movement. What do you see that Western DFC benefiting from, especially with the connectivity to the Gujarat ports?
See, most of the states, when we talk about the northern India, they are the landlocked one. I mean, they do not have any access to ports. And many of the industries are set up in the, like, take the example of Haryana. We are seeing a lot of automobile companies there. Or take the example of, say, Uttar Pradesh. We have a number of other manufacturing segments are there. So raw material coming from various parts of world, how those are transported to plants in, say, state like Haryana or a state like Rajasthan or a state like Uttar Pradesh, which do not have direct access to ports. So that dedicated freight corridor, which is starting from, say, Jawaharlal Port Trust, that's in Mumbai, from Mumbai and Gujarat, if they are providing direct access from port to a plant in Haryana or Uttar Pradesh, that is certainly going to help the industrial activities in these two states.
We're also going to see a future inauguration of a 15-kilometer long line between Kishangarh in Rajasthan and Ateli in Haryana. And this is a double-stack long haul. How is this any different from a longer line like we discussed for today that was inaugurated between Madar and Rewari in Haryana?
The double-stack container is always going to be very, very beneficial. And that means in a limited kind of capacity, you are in a position to carry more and more goods. So whether we talk about today inauguration or the future inauguration of double-stack container, India is one of the few countries in the world which is going to have the double-stack container. We have heard about double-decker passenger trains. Now we are going to have double-decker freight trains, freight vehicles. And that is certainly going to help larger quantity of goods to be carried from one place to other place.
I understand that the Research, Design and Standard Organization, RSDO, for the wagon department has a very strong role to play. You spoke about the capital funding that's coming from Japan, but also a quality control from within the Ministry of Railways.
Certainly, technology is one area. I mean, you can have money, but you need good technology also to use that money. And there you are in a position, you have the expertise, you have seen how the railway people have built railway lines, not just for the passenger transportation, but also for the good transportation in remote area of the country. So we have the expertise. The only thing we need some resources, we need some kind of support. So I think railway will not have any problem in providing any kind of technical support to development or more and more innovation on the freight corridor.
You spoke about Japanese funding. What about World Bank funding, for instance, at the Kanpur Dehat district, when we discussed earlier about the Eastern DFC, where the Bhopur industrial sector is being funded by the World Bank?
The basic advantage of any multilateral agency funding is, one is the lower cost of interest, and the second advantage is a longer duration of repayment. So whether you get from JICA, whether you get from ADB, whether you get from World Bank or any other multilateral agency, these two advantages to help you to focus on the project rather than on the future course of action. I mean, since it's a very long period, say 30 years or 40 years of repayment, and with a much lesser interest, you will be able to focus on the project, and certainly you are going to get resources at a much cheaper cost, which will help you to bring down the cost of project and to make it more efficient.
Well, let's now move on to the other infrastructure project which has caught everyone's imagination, which is the natural gas pipeline from Kochi in Kerala all the way up to Mangaluru in Karnataka. It's 450 kilometers long, and it has been built at a cost of 3,000 crore rupees. Do tell us something about that. It's been inaugurated as well. We had the petroleum and natural gas minister attended along with the chief ministers of both the states. How important is natural gas to the development process as well?
So we are talking about 450-kilometer pipeline which is joining Kochi in Kerala and Mangalore in Karnataka. So basically what we are talking about the national gas grid, one nation, one grid kind of system. And this particular pipeline is bringing gas from, say, port in Kochi to various locations in Karnataka, and which is terminating at Mangalore. And if you see the places which are going to be covered through this gas pipeline is, I believe, it's Ernakulam, Palakkad, Malappuram, and of course Kannur and Kasaragod district of Kerala. So this is very, very important from when we are talking about the one nation, one grid kind of thing. The second advantage is that it is going to provide a gas which is also going to help in curbing the pollution, because it is a clean gas, and that can be used for domestic cooking, that can be used for the transportation, that can be used for the industrial uses. So this gas pipeline is going to help industrial activities and also help in providing pipe gas lines to households in cities which I mentioned.
Shishir, finally, I would like to ask you about road development in the country, the 7-phase NHDP, which is being implemented by the National Highways Authority of India. And there is an estimated expenditure of $92 billion, where about 50,000 kilometers of roads are being upgraded to match international standards.
Road is the vein in any country. Fortunately, since 1999-2000, when the Golden Quadrilateral concept was implemented, and since then we have seen a lot of development on road infrastructure. Today, when we are talking about 6% GDP growth rate or 7% GDP growth rate, we need a good infrastructure facility in terms of road. And let me tell you one more thing about the road development. Road development is one area where we see multiplier effect. One is, of course, the transportation. When it is under construction, it gives maximum number of jobs. The third benefit is that when a road is developed, the areas which are on both sides of road also get a lot of support. If we talk about, say, a highway, there are cities which have become a kind of industrial cluster, because reaching that city or reaching that area is much easier if you have a good road network. So I believe more and more spending on road infrastructure and equally giving attention to the railway as well as waterways, and of course do not forget about the airways. So combination of all these will certainly help the economic development at a faster pace.
Thank you so much, Shishir Sinha, for being with us on this program.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on importance of dedicated freight corridors and other infrastructure developments. The participants were Shishir Sinha, Economic Analyst, and AIR correspondent Arjun Che Chaudhary. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our website newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.